This Blue Jackets team is very different from last year's, but how different are they going to be? We're going to do some predictions on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I just want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. If you wanted to, you could use that Game Time money to buy tickets to the Blue Jackets home opener, which is on Monday night, But the Blue Jackets open the season tomorrow against the Minnesota Wild. If there are any Blue Jackets fans in Minnesota, you could do that as well. But I wanted to, before the season gets started, I wanted to kind of wrap up, I guess, a lot of what I've been talking about over the past kind of couple of weeks or so. Now that the roster is set, now that we know basically what the team is going to look like, providing no one else gets injured, I'm going to knock on wood. I wanted to talk about some predictions. I pulled a couple of predictions from stats people, analytics people. I've got some FanDuel odds for you. And I want to look at who on the Blue Jackets is going to be better than they were last season. We're going to look at who's going to lead in scoring, who's ready for their breakout season, and who's going to surprise you. So we're going to talk about all of that on today's episode. Let's start off with kind of predictions over everything else, because, like I said, I pulled a couple of predictions from stats people. I pulled the FanDuel odds as well. I'm just pulling up one last prediction that I forgot to pull up, or I guess two predictions, which is Jay Fresh does a prediction for the model, and he does a prediction for fans as well. So we're going to take a look at both of those. I've also got Dom from the Athletics predictions, and I've got Micah Blake McCurdy's predictions as well. So let's get into it, because there's a big sweep between all of these things. Let's start with the least optimistic and go towards the most optimistic. So I want to look at the model that is Jay Fresh's model. He has the Blue Jackets finishing at the bottom of the Metropolitan Division. The only team with a worse point prediction than him is the San Jose Sharks. The Blue Jackets are predicted to get 66 points with Jay Fresh's model. This feels low, even for me. If we do the math, like, that's give or take 30 wins. So, 30 plus, I think, 6 overtime losses. Again, if I'm doing the math right, so that's, I can't do that math off the top of my head, but 30 wins, 6 overtime losses, and whatever is left is regulation losses. It's 48, I think. 46, 48, something like that. That is not an improvement on last season, which is frustrating, but the roster is so different from last season, and I know that we were expecting the roster to be much better than last season. I don't know that it is better than last season right now. In fact, it's almost certainly not better than last season, but it is different, and that's kind of the best we can hope for right now. Is, sometimes a change is as good as a rest, as my mother used to say growing up. So the Blue Jackets had 66 points last season. They went 27, 43, and 12. 27 wins, 12 overtime losses. So Jay Fresh's model has them being about the same at that. This is the least optimistic of the models, not by much. Most of the models have them kind of hovering around about there, which feels, again, I don't love it, but I'm struggling to like be much more optimistic. I think when I talked yesterday about kind of just throwing some numbers out there, I said somewhere in between 30 and 40 wins for this club. If they can hit, I think 35 wins, if this club can be kind of a 70 to 75 point team, hopefully closer to 75. That's an improvement on last season with potentially a worse roster. If you take into account, obviously, the fact that there's no Line A, there's no Johnny Gaudreau, Voronkov and Jenna, it sounds like are going to be out until basically the end of the season, until springtime is what the insiders are saying. So depending on if the Blue Jackets are a playoff team, then we might see them. If they're not a playoff team, I suspect they'll probably shut them down for the year, which really, really sucks. But the point is, the Blue Jackets are going to have to find, again, math on the fly, approximately 150 goals from somewhere. That's not quite right, but if we look at the numbers from last season, Johnny Gaudreau had 60 points, Boone Jenner had 35, so there's 95. And then Dmitry Voronkov had 34 on top of that. So that is, again, math is difficult. 140 points, 130 points, 140 points, 130 points. I can do the math. And obviously some of those points will overlap. I feel like, Boone Jenner will have assisted on Johnny Gaudreau's goals. Johnny Gaudreau will have assisted on Jenner's. Voronkov in the mix there as well. But, like, call it 100 goals, give or take. They have to find those from somewhere. And I don't think they've added 100 goals to the lineup. So if they can finish 10 standings points ahead of where they were last season, that feels to me like a big win, especially when you consider, the heaviness that they're going to be playing under. So that's Jay Fresh's stats model. The fan submission. So what he does is he gets people to submit what they think the standings are going to be. And the Blue Jackets are basically in the same place, bottom of the Metropolitan Division, second only to San Jose in the standings. 68 points is what the fans predict. So again, a little bit more generous than Jay Fresh's model. Jay Fresh's model doesn't love the Blue Jackets, but the fans kind of are in the same-ish boat. So is Dom from The Athletic. He's got them predicted to make 68.9 points, or, near as damn it, 69 points. Again, second only to the Sharks for worst record in the league. This one's interesting because a lot of the players so like Dom's model doesn't love Patrick Laine. So taking him out of the equation, you'd think there would be a little bit of an uptick there, despite the fact that objectively they are losing a pretty good player. But again, losing Jenner, losing Voronkov, losing Gaudreau as well. I'm not shocked that the projections don't love the Blue Jackets' chances. I don't necessarily think that they're worse than the Blackhawks or the Ducks, both of whom are above the Blue Jackets in every prediction that we've looked at so far. And I also think that, again, if the Blue Jackets can be a 75-point team, I'll take that. 70 to 75 is about, like I said, about what I'm expecting. And Dom's prediction is near enough that. It's like 1.1 standings point away from that. So I don't know that this is the most realistic, but it's probably the closest to what I'm expecting. In terms of other things, we're going to talk about Micah's prediction last because it's the most optimistic. I got mixed up with my math. I want to take a look at the FanDuel odds quickly, and you can go and you can bet on FanDuel.com if you would like to on what you think the Blue Jackets' regular season points is going to be. They've put the over-under at 67.5 points. So again, right in that kind of 65 to 70 point place that almost all of the predictions that I've looked at have the Blue Jackets going. I still like them having over 67.5 points. Like I said, last season they had 66 points in the standings. I think they can get more than a point and a half, more than 1.5 points better than last season. I do. Maybe that's me being optimistic, which again, as we've covered on this show, like I am being optimistic because I'm giving the team the benefit of the doubt, and until they show me otherwise, I think this team is a point and a half better than last season. I think they're more than a point and a half better than last season. We'll find out. But the interesting one, and the one that I kind of wanted to talk about, is Micah McCurdy does. He's my favorite of the stats guys. I think his work is really easy to understand. He explains it in a really clear way. And it helps also that he is by far the most optimistic about the Blue Jackets. He has them currently sitting at bottom of the Metropolitan Division, but he has them sitting at 86.2 points as a result of kind of just before the season starts. So he usually does like, okay, this is what the standings, the point predictions have changed over the last 2 weeks, but obviously we haven't had any games yet. So as of right now, or as of yesterday, I guess, which hasn't changed because nothing has happened in the past 24 hours for the Blue Jackets, he has them at 86.2, which is a full 20 points higher than Jay Fresh. It is 18 points higher than Dom from The Athletic. It is 19 points higher than FanDuel. So, like, a pretty significant jump. Like, 18 to 20 standings points is not an insignificant jump in the standings, which is really interesting. And I also find it interesting that he has them better than 6 other teams. So, according to, again, points projections, this is not what the standings are going to look like, but San Jose, Anaheim, Chicago, St. Louis, Boston, and Montreal are all projected to be worse than the Blue Jackets. Detroit is projected to be exactly half a point better than the Blue Jackets, so literally an overtime loss better than the Blue Jackets, which feels very, very doable. This has the Blue Jackets finishing with the 7th worst record in the league, which is still not great, but is a big step up from kind of the last couple of seasons. Like last season, obviously finished with the 4th worst record. The season before that, the 2nd worst record. The season before that, I feel like they super overachieved and they ended up with the 12th worst record, if I remember rightly. And then the season before that, they finished with the 5th worst record. So, like, again, taking steps forward. And the fact that Micah's is so different from everyone else's does kind of concern me a little bit, but in my mind, Micah is usually up there in terms of accuracy. So I guess we'll kind of see where we go from there. To kind of wrap all of that up, I do think they're probably going to be better than what most people said, but worse than what Micah said. Again, I still think 70 to 75 points is a realistic prediction for this team. To put that in context, in terms of last season, the Montreal Canadiens went 30, 36, and 16 and had 76 points. They finished one place in the standings above the Blue Jackets. The Coyotes finished at 77 points. The Senators finished at 78 points. I would expect the Blue Jackets to kind of be in that mix. I expect all 3 of those teams, or, the Canadiens, the Utah Hockey Club, and the Ottawa Senators, to take steps forward. But I expect teams like Boston to take steps down. I expect Calgary to take a step down. People are sleeping on the roster weaknesses of the St. Louis Blues. I think they're going to be a really weak team this year, which, again, is backed up by Micah's. So, again, I think they're probably going to be in the mix with, the teams like the Sharks, the Blackhawks, the Ducks, kind of in that grouping of teams. But I do expect them to be better than last season. And again, maybe that's optimism. Maybe that's just blind homerism. I don't know. But I think when you look at the roster on paper, I think is weaker. But I think the coaching has improved. And I think all of the players last season that were good are going to be better this season. And we'll see what the new additions do to the overall standings. We're going to take a quick break now. And then I want to talk about a couple more predictions in terms of like individual players. We're going to talk about leading scorer. We're going to talk about who's going to be the best defenseman, who's going to be the best forward, like what the goaltending is going to be like. We're going to talk about all of that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I've got to tell you about Game Time because I don't know about you, but I love to last minute buy hockey tickets, and Game Time is the only place I go to for that anymore. I used to use other sites, now I don't. Game Time is the one for me. And it's not just sports. They've got music, theater, comedy, and they've got a brand new feature, which I love. It's called Game Time Picks, and it makes getting tickets to your favorite live event even easier. It filters out the fluff to only show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I am going to be at the Sharks game tomorrow, and we got our tickets through Game Time because, quite frankly, it was the best deal. They always have great seats. You can see what the view from your seat is like before you buy. They've got the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. If you find tickets in your section and row for less, they're going to credit you 110% of the difference as part of their lowest price guarantee. And you can toggle on all-in fees, all-in pricing, which means that you don't get any surprise fees at checkout. You don't think, oh, this is a bargain, and then you get there and they've added, $40 in fees on top of that. You can see all of the prices on your screen before you even get to checkout, which I love because I hate trying to do the math on, okay, well, this is a $30 ticket. They're probably going to put another $10 in fees on top of that, so it's a $40 ticket. It's all right there for you at Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We've talked about the general predictions of what's happening for the Blue Jackets, or what could happen for the Blue Jackets. And now I wanted to talk a little bit about some kind of individual performances. And I'm kind of looking at who's going to lead this team in scoring this season. And there's a couple of options for this. I think Fantilli is a safe bet. He had a really strong rookie season before he got hurt. I think Zach Werenski is also a solid bet for this. He came second on the team in scoring last season. He had 57 points in 70 games, which I believe is almost a record for the highest number of points by a defenseman in a single season for the Blue Jackets. So again, if he manages to stay healthy and they have a real defensive partner for him and the power play manages to go, if the power play starts going, I might pencil in a 20-goal season for Zach Werenski, quite frankly. He also feels like a really safe bet. I think kind of an out there bet is Kent Johnson, who looked really, really good in the preseason, but I don't know that he'll get the ice time to lead the team in scoring unless, a lot of things change in terms of who's playing on whose line, which, again, the first game hasn't even started yet. We don't know what's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if he just takes off this season and leads the team in scoring. However, my prediction for leading scorer is Kirill Marchenko. He's playing on the top line. He's got a very acceptable playmaker in Sean Monahan. We'll see who he gets on the other side of Monahan. I still think it should be Johnson, but it looks like right now it's going to be Chinikov. But last season, led the way with 23 goals in 78 games, had 42 points, which was third on the team. I know the numbers aren't great, but again, the team was real bad last year. So, I'm expecting guys like that to take steps forward. The season before that, he had 23 goals, I believe it was. 21 goals, which was third on the team in scoring. And he's really rounded out kind of the playmaking aspect of his game as well. He went from 4 assists to, I think, 25 assists in a season. So Marchenko is my pick for who's going to lead the Blue Jackets in scoring. I think he's definitely going to lead them in goals. We'll see what happens in terms of leading in overall points. If they have a healthy Sean Monahan, that could be really interesting because obviously he had kind of a couple of down seasons, was injured, a lot was happening. It wasn't great for him by any stretch of the imagination. But in terms of how he looked last season, he looked pretty good. He had 35 points in 49 games with Montreal. And then he had, I'm just pulling up the numbers, with 34 games in Winnipeg, he had 24 points on top of that. So he had 59 points in 83 games, which would have been good for second on the Blue Jackets in scoring. I don't think he's going to lead the way, but I think he could make things interesting. And again, if the power play starts clicking, if he and Marchenko continue to build chemistry, if they find someone on that other wing to replace Jenner or to replace Gaudreau, who was, obviously pegged to be there originally, that could be a really interesting line to watch. Like I said, don't think he's going to lead the team in scoring, but I think he's probably going to be up there. I would be surprised if he finishes top 3, potentially top 5 in scoring. Again, provided he manages to stay healthy, I could see 50 to 60 points for Sean Monahan this season. I think Marchenko hits 60 and above. I wouldn't be surprised if Werenski hits 60 and above as well. And I would love to see Fantilli take off. Again, he looks really good in the preseason. They just have to find the right line mates for him. And again, that all-important power play. If the Blue Jackets score like an extra 10 power play goals, it could be the difference between bottom of the standings and, finishing within reach of a playoff spot, if not actually in a playoff spot. I don't have the numbers here for the power play. I do know it was real bad, so we'll see how it goes there. In terms of defensemen, I don't think it's unfair to say that Zach Werenski is going to be the number one defenseman for this team. He's going to be the best defenseman. He, I believe, is just shy of a milestone with this team. He is currently sitting on 90 goals in his career. He just hit 300 career points. So that was the milestone that I was thinking about. But he probably hits 100 goals this season, which is really fun. And I think if you look at kind of Blue Jackets records, he's going to be up there in terms of, he's like really close to, I think, the all-time assists leader for the Blue Jackets. I'm just pulling up the records now because I was looking at them earlier. And again, shockingly, closed the tab like a fool. In terms of career leaders, okay, here we go. Currently, Rick Nash is on 258 assists for all time. Werenski sitting on 212, so he needs 46 assists to pass Nash for the all-time assists leader for this team. He's not quite coming up on the points record, but he is second among active Blue Jackets. If we include Boone Jenner in that, who obviously is going to miss a big chunk of the season, but I expect if Jenner's out all season, then Werenski will almost definitely overtake him. He is 62 points away from that. He's going to get into the top 5 this season. So currently we've got Rick Nash at the number 1. Cam Atkinson is in second place with 402 points all time. Boone Jenner, 364. Nick Foligno, 334. And then David Ravorny at 317. So Werenski needs 16 assists to get into the top 5 in all-time Blue Jackets, which is fun and cool. I don't think anyone else is close to any kind of record necessarily. Again, Boone Jenner was up there. He's just under 100 goals away from all-time leaders, which doesn't seem like it's going to be beatable unless something incredible happens. But he is Werenski is up there in, there is a world in which he is the leading Blue Jackets point getter by the time he retires, and there's a lot of things that have to go right for that, but I'm expecting a big season for Werenski, again, especially if he can stay healthy. He obviously was a big part of the team last season. Like I said, second on the team in scoring, had 57 points, which was a career high for him. The season before that, he had 8 points in 13 games before getting injured, was like on a really, really good streak. The season before that had 48 points in 68 games. Again, his best season since his rookie season. He has a 20-goal season under his belt. And in his 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, in his 8 seasons with the club, he has hit double digits in goals in all but 2. And one of those was the 13-game season that he played season before last. And then the post-COVID season, he played 35 games and had 7 goals for 20 points. So those are the only 2 seasons that he hasn't hit double digits in goals. So I am looking at Zach Werenski to have a big season for this club. They need it. They really need him to step up. If you look at the roster, you need Werenski to step up. He is by far the best offensive defenseman that they have. You need him to get the power play going. You need him to play a lot of minutes. He plays probably too many minutes for my liking, but he's going to play too many minutes regardless. Or he's going to play a lot of minutes regardless, I should say. Not necessarily too many minutes, but big part of this team. Potentially the most important player. If you look at, you could argue that Fantilli is the most important player, but with, the loss of guys like Laine, guys like Gaudreau, with Jenna being out for the season, if you look at the veterans on this team and you look at the leaders on this team, like that, Werenski, it's Werenski. There was a lot of conversation about whether he was going to get the C when Foligno left. It went to Jenna, obviously, which I don't dislike that choice at all, but Werenski's going to be a leader on this club, I think, on the score sheet and also in the locker room. So he's a big player for this team. We're going to take another quick break, and then when we get back, I want to just kind of wrap up by talking about players that I expect to really take steps forward this season. There's a couple of expected names and a couple of potentially less expected names. We're going to talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I've got to tell you about FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can do live play-by-play, and so much more on the very same page where you place your bets. So you don't have to, jump between the ESPN website or NHL.com and then back to FanDuel and try and figure out what's going on while you're also trying to watch the game. You can do it all in one place. And when you place your first $5 bet, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. And that $5 bet doesn't matter whether you win or lose. You don't even have to wait for it to cash out. You're going to get those $200 immediately. So, like I was talking about earlier, the over-under for the Blue Jackets total points this season is 67.5. If you think they're going to do better than that, put $5 on it. If you think they're going to do worse, put $5 on it. You don't even have to win. You're going to get those $200 either way. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook, and also our official sportsbook here at the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're going to finish off here with a couple of guys that, again, I think are going to really show up for the Blue Jackets this season. Do I think that they're going to lead the team? No, but I think that they are going to take steps forward. I'm just pulling up the roster because, again, Blue Jackets drinking game. I have closed the exact tab that I needed instead of the tab I meant to close. So, looking at the Blue Jackets roster, there are a lot of guys here. A lot of guys have new contracts, which is something. So, obviously, you want to look at guys like Kent Johnson taking steps forward. You want Adam Fantilli to take a step forward. He doesn't have a new contract yet. He's still on his ELC. But, Dmitry Voronkov was a guy that I was looking at to take a big step forward. He's an RFA after this season. So, he needed to have a big show-me year to earn a new contract. Someone that I'm looking at, and this probably will not surprise many of you, I am expecting Cole Sillinger to have a really, really good season. I don't know that he's going to put up the points that people potentially want him to put up. But again, if you can get, he had, I think, 32 points last season. If you can get 50 points out of Cole Sillinger playing on the third line, but if he stays with Kent Johnson, that is a pairing that I think is going to create big dividends. He's going to continue to grow as a two-way center. He's going to get more penalty kill time. Depending on how the matchups work, I would expect him to see big matchups. He's probably the next, he's going to be the next guy into the top 6 if Monahan gets injured, knock on wood, or if Fantilli gets injured, knock on wood. He is a third line center right now that can play high in the lineup. So I'm expecting him to, again, continue to take a step forward. And he's not even 22 years old yet either. He's 21 years old and he's already got over 200 NHL games. He is, I wouldn't call him a veteran by any stretch of the imagination, but he's one of the guys on the team that has a lot of games for the Blue Jackets. I'm looking at who has more Blue Jackets games specifically than Sillinger that's on the roster right now, and I don't know if there are many guys on here, because again, just because of the turnover, like it might just be that Jack Johnson and Zach Werenski are the only two with more specifically Blue Jackets games than him, which is pretty impressive for a 21-year-old. I'm expecting him to take a big step forward. Another guy that I'm looking at is Yegor Chinikov. He's getting a big opportunity right now. They're putting him on that top line with Monahan and Marchenko. Can he pull it off there? When I talked to Jeff Svoboda earlier in the season, we talked about, would we be surprised if Yegor Chinikov gets 30 goals this season? No, we would not. I think it's probably less likely, but if you can get 20 to 25 goals out of Chinikov, like, I'm going to be thrilled. He also has a brand new contract, so he feels like he's got something to prove as well. And I'm looking at Chinikov to really take that step forward and prove that the Blue Jackets weren't insane for drafting him where they drafted him. He was the surprise of the 2020 draft. He was an overager that wasn't really on anyone's draft board except apparently for Jarmo Kekalainen's. They took him, I want to say 20th overall or 21st overall. So I would really love if he can prove to people that he deserved to be taken with that pick. I think we've seen improvement from Chinikov kind of year in, year out, and I would love for him to take another huge step forward, and to continue to be a great player for this team, and to, again, solidify himself as a legitimate top six guy. I think he's probably more of a middle six guy, but if he can hang with the big boys on that top line, like, that's going to be huge for this team. 29 points last year in 53 games. Prorate that out to if he played the full 80, he's probably sitting on 40-ish points. I think he aims for 50. He had 16 goals. I think he aims for 20, 25 goals. So those are my guys to pick for big breakout seasons. I would also love to see Jay Christensen take steps forward. I would love to see Jordan Harris take steps forward. Not necessarily steps forward, but I think with him being new to the team, and I think he's got a lot to show people. I think there's a lot of potential there. Those are my picks for guys that need to take steps forward. I think David Jiricek also needs to take a step forward, but I don't know that the team is going to give him the opportunity to do that, which is so frustrating. But would love to see David Jiricek, again, take an opportunity with both hands and hold on to it with everything he has. He just needs to get that opportunity, But in terms of defensemen, I think Jake Christensen is again, huge opportunity there for him. He's currently penciled in on the second line with Damon Severson. I like Christensen's game a lot, and I think this really is kind of go big or go home for him. He is a UFA after this season. We'll see what happens. He needs to have a big season because he's playing for a new contract. He signed a 1-year extension this summer for $775K. Has made the NHL roster. Is not just a call-up. We'll see what happens there. I would love to see him take steps forward and become, I don't know that he is going to be like a legitimate top 4 option long-term, but if he can hold his own, again, if he can hang with the big boys, like, that's huge for this team because they've been weak on left D for a long time. And so if you look at, Christensen, Matejchuk, these guys kind of stepping up to be with Werenski, Jordan Harris as well, like, that's huge for this team. So those are my guys that I'm picking for potential, like, either breakout seasons or guys that are taking huge steps forward, what have you, whichever one you like. But that's kind of it in terms of predictions. I do think the Blue Jackets probably finished between 5th and 10th overall in terms of the draft lottery, which is fine. It's not what we hoped for at this time 2 months ago. That's not what we hoped, but I think right now that feels hopeful and realistic between 5th and 10th in the draft rankings. But we'll see. Blue Jackets open the season tomorrow at Minnesota, so we're going to do a game preview for you tomorrow. We're going to be doing it with Seth Topal of Locked On Wild. You'll remember him when he came and said all kinds of nice things about Dean Everson when we hired him. So we'll talk to Seth about what we're expecting in this game, what we're expecting from the Blue Jackets, what we're expecting from the Wild, all that good stuff. And that's going to be tomorrow's episode. So I think it's going to be fun. Come check it out. You can find us wherever you get podcasts. You can find us on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at _JacobFoster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jacket. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.